And in order for me to continue to learn, I had to quit. And I think for a lot of people, that was just something that, people, those jobs don't come a dime a dozen, and people try to hold on to them. And I think for me, it was just more like, I want to continue to learn about wine. The best way to do that was to make my own.
You're listening to the Vint Podcast, bringing you expert interviews, alternative market insights, and exclusive access to the world of wine and spirits investing. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast. My name is Brady. I'm joined by Billy in the studio, headed into our first couple weeks of spring, and a lot of great episodes upcoming.
Yep, limited weather talk this time. We have good weather here, so no need to talk about it.
It's our Achilles heel of podcasting. This past week we had some big changes. If you're on the Vint platform, you could see we did have our Dom Perignon collection sell out, and our Kurosawa whiskey collection really take off in terms of demand among our platform. We had the Kurosawa casks, which are, at time of recording, just about sold out. I think we're at like 95% sold out right now. So certainly an opportunity to pick up some shares there. And then at the time of recording, this collection isn't out yet, but once you guys hear this, we will have a new collection of Domaine della Romanée-Conti. It's a case of Romanée-Conti from the 2009 vintage, a single case of 3 bottles. Wanted to spend a little bit of time lingering there with you, Billy, and talk about DRC just for a little bit, and also just about this case, which maybe could catch some people off guard when they see that there is a single case of 3 wines that we're valuing at $105,000. We've seen that before with whiskey with single bottles, but certainly these are some of the most expensive wines on the marketplace these days, right?
Yeah. I mean, Burgundy has been on a run for a few years now, and DRC is the premier. It's known widely as the best wine in the world, the premier producer from Burgundy. So, rightfully so. And then Romanée-Conti is the namesake of the whole company. It's the vineyard that is named after it. It's been highly prized as a single vineyard plot for centuries, and even in the late, I think it was the 1700s. It was actually, there's a bidding war between somebody in the king's court, one of his mistresses, and the guy who ended up buying it. And then when he bought it, it was so good that he decided he wasn't going to share any of it with anybody. He basically had it all produced every year, and it was just for his own personal consumption. And didn't sell a piece of it, which you rarely see that with, like, not even selling barrels or some of the grapes to offset costs. It was just that good. So it's pretty cool.
If I go online, I can find, bottles of Romanée-Conti for less than we have it here. Can you just talk to the audience a little bit about what is the importance of the bottles in their original case, where these bottles came from, and kind of the provenance, especially when you get up to kind of this echelon of assets. How does the particular type of asset that we have compare to maybe anything else that you might see a listing for on the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, first you hit it on the nail on the head there. There's the difference between a loose bottle and a bottle in a original case, for example, just even if it was cardboard, demonstrates, how well the wine's been maintained to an extent. If the case is in good shape, it demonstrates that, the wine originally came from the producer, because that case can typically only come from the producer. But in this case, it is an original wooden case as well. So these cases are highly managed. They come only from the producer. Typically they have, after a certain year, I can't remember which one it was, they have bands around them, but either way they have identifying markers. They are nailed down. And then these ones in particular have been stored specifically in bond, which means they've been in professional storage only. So it wasn't some guy taking out a prized bottle of DRC and putting it in his fridge and putting it back. Basically this wooden box came from the producer to a professional storage warehouse and has stayed in professional storage ever since. So that is one reason why this set is so expensive, or so valuable, I guess, not expensive. The other part is that the vintage was very good. It was one of the top scoring wines by Robert Parker that year. It also scored 98 plus from Berghound. I can read the description here for you guys. There were only 2 wines that got 98 plus from Robert Parker that year. It was the Romanée-Conti and a Roumier Bon Mar. So it was literally one of the top wines of the whole vintage. And then the description was, and that's for Burgundy. There was probably some other higher scoring wines, but that was top scoring Robert Parker, the vintage. And then it was described by Berghound as, this possesses such a spectacular nose that you don't even have to drink it to be thrilling, and the flavors are perfectly spherical. This may well be the wine of the vintage because wine does not get much, if any, better than this. So I think that's pretty good. A little over the top, but yeah.
I always think it's funny when you see other wines of the world, not even just comparing like variety to variety, but just other wines of the world getting 99 and 100-point scores from critics, and then like any given DRC vintage, maybe a wine might get 97, 98. Certainly there's 100-point wines from the producer, but these wines might get a 98 or 99 from a critic when a certainly lesser regarded wine somewhere else in the world is getting 100 from another critic. So there's definitely a high standard, I guess is what I'm getting at, for these legacy producers, and especially one with as much renown, as Domaine de la Romanée-Conti. Certainly special wines. This is exactly the type of asset I think, when I talk with investors about the way that we think about the market and the way that we think about one of the advantages of investing with Vint is really that, this is the premier asset kind of on the marketplace when you think about owning, the top, maybe most investable producer in Romanée-Conti or Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, which has such a track record of these wines appreciating on the secondary market. And you're owning one of the top recent vintages in wines that now have enough age on them whereby they're starting to come into some window of maturity, right? It's definitely an awesome asset to have.
Yeah, I wanted to hop in one note on the maturity thing. We did some work actually with graduate students from Syracuse, and the professor's name is skipping my mind, but he's actually been doing wine-specific research for many years, especially on Primora research. So we teamed up with him to do some research on both Burgundy and Bordeaux, how specific, and we gave them a really large data dump from different resources that we had to kind of draw from and compare. And they did analysis of, I think it was past 15 or 20 vintages, might have been closer to 20, to see how they performed over time on the secondary market. And what we found is that you see certain steps during certain time periods, but especially as wines approach their drinking windows, you see some get there. So like the 7th year has seen a lot of growth for many. That's like kind of as the wine's approaching its drinking window. And 11th year after release has also seen a great pop, and that's when people really do start kind of consuming those wines, because typically for something like DRC, it's held for 2.5, 3 years before release. So we're approaching that window for this wine, which is another reason why we're very excited about it and bullish. As aside from its current price, we believe that there's the potential for that to continue to be even more in demand, especially as some of the bottles are drank or consumed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's sometimes unhelpful to zoom too far in on a particular asset when you're thinking about investment, especially investment over 2 to 5, 2 to 7 years. These are markets that are kind of like cranky and old, and they move slowly, and some of the pricing can move slowly and in a disjointed manner as well. So we always think we're positioning ourselves the right way when we're buying absolute best assets stored and with the absolute best provenance. I think that we're definitely set up well with this. So grab some shares. There's some whiskey available as well for folks to kind of get some diversification in there. And we're excited about this offering as we have a lot of our recent releases. Let's get into our interview for today. We have a really special guest, maybe one that, if you are just getting into the wine world, or maybe are just sort of have experienced wine through popular culture in the past, you may know our guest today, André Hueston Mack, who got his start in the restaurant business and kind of like across food and beverage together, and so certainly has his hands in a number of different aspects of the industry now. Sort of famously started in at the French Laundry, was on the opening team at Per Se in New York, so has been kind of on the the highest echelons of dining here in the West, and has also kind of taken a lot of inspiration from pop culture, skate culture, sort of like grunge of the South and of each coast to bring together into his projects now, whereby he has a ton of experience across the industry and is working on wine and restaurants, and he has a ham bar in New York. So definitely has a lot to share about wine culture, food culture. He contributes to Bon Appetit on YouTube. He has his hands in a lot of things. So we're excited to talk to André today, who is certainly one of maybe the most recognizable figures in wine and popular culture.
Yeah, and I think specifically something you didn't touch on is hip hop there. Hip hop and music in general, it plays a big role in his upbringing and his wines. He was actually, he didn't necessarily get his start at the French Laundry. He worked his way up from San Antonio and became a renowned sommelier, which is wild because, even if you live in Texas today, you know how hard it is to get certain wines there. So to become a world-class sommelier down there and then transition to the biggest stage is in and of itself amazing. I first got really acquainted with André when I read his book, 99 Bottles. It's a really interesting book that kind of walks you through his life through certain bottles, and each bottle means something at a certain time, and he explains to you a little bit about whether it's a wine or something else, but they're almost all wines, and why that, number one, what the wine tastes like, and a little bit of education, but also how it fit into his life. So I've wanted to speak with him for years. I read that a couple years ago. He's been blowing up ever since because he makes great wine. You may see OPP. It's other people's Pinot. It's kind of his most widely distributed one, but Maison Noir, his wine brand, has really caught fire. So this was an amazing interview. Again, like Brady mentioned, he's a restaurateur, serial restaurateur. I'm sure if you live in Williamsburg or in Brooklyn, you may have come across his places, but this was a fascinating conversation. And it was great. It's like we were on our own Bon Appetit episode, just chatting it up. He even wore his hat.
And releasing a new project. I didn't want to. I know we kind of threw a lot at folks, but his whiskey project now, which certainly is relevant because, like I said, he touches so many aspects of the industry, but also whiskey, which is relevant to us. Rye Sons is the name of that label. So we'll drop all of the projects that André is involved with in the show notes, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. Here's André. Hey, André, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, man. How's it going, guys?
It's going well. Yeah, I wore my beanie today because I've seen you in the iconic red beanie on Bon Appetit. So I was like, man, I'll put my Vint beanie on today. So
I love it. Yeah, this is red hat, André.
That's right. Today. Yeah. And we probably not a lot of folks know that we're on YouTube now. So, we typically do Spotify and Apple Music. But if you're listening on YouTube, you get to see us. André, thanks for coming on again. Want to get just a snapshot of your background, not linger too long there, but do want to hear about, not many people get their start at the French Laundry and per se and kind of enter the wine world head first like that. I mean, I know that was where you were at in the early 2000s. Maybe you can talk about how you went from one end of the dining, hospitality, wine spectrum to maybe like a more creative, modern sort of approach to the way you're doing things now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was kind of a great starting point. And it's funny because I wouldn't say that I started at the French Laundry, right? Because I got into wine by watching old episodes of Frasier. That led into working at other places and, places that didn't really have wine lists. I mean, I think they had 3 wines on the list and they were all White Zinfandel, you know what I mean? So it's like it was from that spectrum. I don't think I started there, but it was interesting to say, my first foray into fine dining, it was at the tippy top, and I just think that it was just more of a hankering of wanting to create more. Like it was like just having this thirst of knowledge and just every day wanting to live it, and whatever you put in is whatever you get it back out. And so for me, it was more like trying to figure out how, I wanted 2 for 1, 3 for 1, right? Like how many days I put in, I think I worked 40 something days in a row or something like that at the French Laundry, 30 something. But I just wanted to continue to learn. And I felt like at some point where a lot of people would probably be more comfortable and started to become relaxed. For me, I just kept pushing. It was like, okay, what's next? I feel like if I wanted, I wanted to continue to learn about wine, but I felt like I had reached, the end of one point. And in order for me to continue to learn, I had to quit. And I think for a lot of people, that was just something that, people, those jobs don't come a dime a dozen, and people try to hold on to them. And I think for me, it was just more like, I want to continue to learn about wine. The best way to do that was to make my own. And by making my own, I could scratch several other itches I had, wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to have more creativity in my life. And that was it. And then leaving all of that and then having to start back at zero somewhat was a hard thing. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask about one step on how you got into the French Laundry. I thought this was a really kind of cool story from your book. And we've had a couple different Conternos in our collections, but can you talk about how the Aldo Conterno Gran Busia kind of helped kick you into that bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I had there was only one master sommelier in the whole state of Texas. Texas wasn't as grand in wine as it is now, and I went to go work stage one day. I was going to be in Houston one day. And I had a friend set up a stage with the only master sommelier. I remember it was a Thursday. The guy, Wednesday night, my friend says, show up at the back door at Cafe Annie at 4:30 tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, all right, great. I remember pulling up in the back, and I'm like, this is fucking stupid. Like, I don't want to do this. And like getting cold feet. My girlfriend was going to go shop at the mall, and I was like, I'm just going to go to the mall too. And she's like, no, you're already here. You have to go in. And so I walked through those doors. And, I met Paul Roberts. Paul was the master sommelier. That was on a Thursday. That Monday, he had accepted the job to be the beverage director for Thomas Keller's properties, for all of his properties. And we just started working. And I just remember being on the floor with him, and it was just kind of like, we just flowed back and forth. But I have to tell you, like, he was wondering, he didn't really know who I was. He just knew I was some kid from San Antonio showing up. And so all throughout service, he's asking me questions. And at one time he says, he asked me something. I said, oh, yeah, we have Conterno on the list. And he's, which one? And I said, Aldo. And he goes, which one? I said, Gran Busia. And he said, which vintage? I said, 97. And he was like, I like you, kid. And I think that was the one that like cemented in his head, like, I want this kid to come work for me. And at the end of the night, lo and behold, he says, I gotta hire 6 sommeliers all across Thomas Properties. Would you like to be one of them? And I was like, fuck yeah.
I love that story too, because
absolutely.
That comes from you pushing, like you were saying before, you were there for a competition the next day, and then you were like, oh, I'll just do something extra. And then that extra work just kind of all snowballs. So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel like you always have to fill your day, pack your day. Like I was used to be there a lot, but I wasn't, and now I was there. The timing was just right. When you really think about it, he was leaving the next week or week and a half, and just it took forever for him to write me back, but he finally wrote me back, and it just made sense. And I've always been that way. It's like, okay, hey, I'm gonna go do this, but like, what could it hurt? It didn't. I met so many people along the way, just on that one stop. I think I met Josh Reynolds, and Josh, ended up working for Tanzer, and I think he works for Antonio or whatever. But anyway, it's like you just met all of these people in this one trip to the restaurant. It was pretty amazing and life-changing.
And something that's probably interesting to our listeners who, obviously we're a wine investment platform, and so we kind of are at this financial intersection of the wine industry. And you actually had your Series 7 and 63 before all of this even happened, right? What was, so you probably actually have a pretty good perspective on kind of like where we're coming from in terms of bringing these two worlds together, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Pardon me. That was kind of one of those things where watches Barbarians at the Gates once, and that was it. So for me, I watched that movie and I was like, okay, I'm going to be a broker. I'm going to do whatever. And I just remember a friend from high school. He's like, yeah, man, I got this job at Citicorp. You should come check it out. The great thing about it is that they'll sponsor you to take your test, and there's no commitment. And so what happened was people were taking the test and then quitting the next day. And then when I got there, I had to sign. They changed the rules, and I had to sign up for 2 years or something like that. But yeah, it was just it was like I think that that where the wine world and the finance world kind of overlapped for me. It was the easy part. It was the studying, the memorization, and all of those kind of things that I was used to. Obviously from college, but in this first career, and then onto the third career of just it was really about immersing yourself in it, understanding it, taking a test, and memorizing some things, but also being passionate about it.
Awesome. Yeah. Before we move on, I really want to touch on all the things you're doing now between making your own wine, your own rye, even green tea, like working with that somehow. We saw that today. But one last question on your past. While you're at Per Se, and speaking of the highest end of wine, you had a little bit of interaction with Rudy Kinnearwan. What was it like serving people wine back in the day when everybody was just buying crazy bottles? And then I know he came in and would have his own reel, or probably not. What was that like back in the day?
It was amazing, man. To paint a picture, you think about it's New York City, right? It's like, it's the Mecca, right? So like it's there. I worked at the French Laundry, and that was like great, and that was kind of like when in Rome. It was laid back. We sold a lot of California wine, and there were big names and things were great. But you went to New York, and it was like it was on steroids. It was a totally different and completely different beast. Just everybody was spending money. Everybody was buying wines. And then, it's like, okay, I heard of these fat cats from Goldman. Those guys are there. But like those guys were interesting because they bought the wines when they were on release for $60 or whatever it was way back in the day. So you had those guys, and they kind of generally had a rule where they didn't spend more than like $600-700 on a bottle of wine at the restaurant, especially if they had it in their collection. And what made it exciting was some of the new money guys that would come around, especially Rudy, who was 27 at the time. And Rudy would come in, and he's buying stuff off the list, $6,000, $7,000. So it was just a different type of thing. Like, I haven't seen it yet. Like, I don't want to be one of those old heads. Oh, back in my day, it was like this. But it was really a sight to see. There's no Instagram photos. There's nothing of that to kind of capture the moment. But it was, it was pretty intense in a lot of different ways. Just where you'd come to the table and the guy's like, every time I came to the table, he gave me $200-300. Not Rudy, but like it was just like people were just buying the most crazy ones. Two brothers would come in, spend $16,000 on wine, not food, just wine. Two people. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, and then they got a reservation every single time that they called. They could call the day of, and they'd get a reservation. But, you had those days where, 5 couples come in, and I dropped $50,000 worth of wine on them.
Was that disenchanting? Like, did it erode some of that kind of romance and like love for some of these producers and names? Like, what effect did that have?
No, but I think yes and no. I mean, it wouldn't erode those because generally speaking, at that level, they're allowing us to choose at some way. And these are all, the wine cellar is filled with all of the ones that you have respect for. And so a lot of times we got to choose those wines for the guests. Where it was like, oh, hey, like we're thinking about this or this. And, we got to choose, or some, it was just like, just keep it going. For like the brothers that used to come in, it was just like the two brothers, like, it's a free for all, like whatever we want. So we were excited about that. I think just overall, the whole experience at some point just became, I wouldn't say grotesque in some way, but it just, over time, you're just like, wow, like all of this just for nourishment. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just eating. It's like 40 guys in the kitchen. Everybody's running around. Like, I love it to this day. I still do. But I think it was just, for me, it was just too much at some point where it was just like, it was great. It was fun. But it was somewhat like, it did feel like it took a little bit of my soul with it at some point.
you wanted to strip it back a little bit, which I think is what you're doing with your projects now, and sort of the approach that you're taking, even with some of the content that you're creating as well, sort of stripping some of that excess away and leaving kind of bare bones, like not just the romanticism, but also like all the like learning and culture that's underneath.
Well, I mean,
right?
that's exactly the way that I taught with inside of those four walls, right? That's what I think everybody thinks that like, oh no, he was this. No, that's like the way that I speak about wine and talk about wine that you see me on TV, on TV, Bon Appetit or anywhere you might. It's in the pre-shift huddle-ups at Per Se, at French Laundry, it was trying to take some of the pretense out about wine and put it, bring it back down to earth and like, this is how we talk about wine, how we explain wine, and relatable. Like I would never expect them or, encourage them. They would never encourage to go to a table and say, oh, this wine is banging. But that's how I explained it in the huddle-up, right?
Yeah,
when people were like, did he just say banging? And I was like, yes, like I got your attention. Everybody understands what I'm talking about, right? And it's like just being able to relate to them personally, I think what really kind of helped me in a lot of ways and made them feel confident about the things I was saying, and that it wasn't this like WWE SmackDown when you're at the table. I mean, I feel like I got a lot of that in New York with a lot of guests where they thought that they knew more than you, and then they wanted to engage into this thing. And so it was always like, I've been drinking wine longer than you've been around. I said that might be true, but you know what? But I've had this wine, this particular vintage, more times than days of the month days of the week last year. You know what I mean? So it's like, no, this is what I do for a living. Like you might be drinking longer than me, but I've had this wine. I know exactly what this wine tastes like. And so it was a little bit of that. But like, I've always presented wine to everybody around me in the same way that I presented on this larger platform. Mm-hmm. And so the way, like I said, and most people find that hard to believe. I was like, no, the way that I speak about wine and the things that I say about wine, we're all developed, on the floor at the French Laundry in Per Se.
I'd like to get your perspective.
The videos are very similar to that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I guess I am on a little bit of a lag. No, I'd love to get your perspective on the quote unquote natural wine movement. And I know people have their different perspectives, and I drink a lot of quote unquote natural wine, but I do feel one of the benefits, like I go to natural wine bars here in LA, and the waiter will walk up and just be like, this wine slaps. Also, it has a little bit of funk on it. I think you're going to enjoy it. And a lot more people that I know are drinking it now, as opposed to people who were maybe turned off by a really formal wine setting. And that's leading them down the road to discovering, more traditional, if you will, wines. What's your take on that?
My take is I'm part of the good wine movement. If it's good, I want to drink it. If it's not good, I don't want to drink it. Right. And I think to me, that's always been this. It's like I want to talk about how the wine tastes, not just like, I think sometimes we fall into this thing of like natural. I was part of this movement before it had a name.
Yep.
Right. So it wasn't, so I think when it became, in order for it to be a movement, you need people, right? So it had people, right? Now it started to be people. It was a real movement. Now it has a name. And I'm not sure that I try to explain to everybody, if you look at the traditional wine world, just say that within that, there's people who make good wine and there's people who make shit.
Exactly.
And I think that underneath the natural wine movement flag, that exists as well. Right? Mm-hmm. So there's definitely wines that are still going through secondary fermentation. There's wines filled with flaws. That's on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, they're, some of the most amazing and expressive wines that they are. And so for me, I look at it that way, and that's kind of it. I don't fall into the trap. I get it. I think I think at the beginning, natural wine came along. It was irreverent, with its irreverency and all of that kind of stuff. I was there before that movement, right? So like my whole brand of being irreverent, my whole, all of that labeling wine and all that, I want it to be fun. And that's what I really like about the movement. It's really encouraging. It's fun. It has laughter. It has all these things. But somehow I feel like the dogma in which it comes with has added just another layer of pretense in the wine world. And in that way, it's no different. But you have a lot of people fighting for that. And I think, and just to say that I would probably say in the last 6 or 7 months, there's been a significant change where a lot of people in that movement are saying, no, that other stuff is bullshit. Right? You know what I mean? Like, I think within that whole movement, people are calling each other out and saying, hey, that's not good, this is not great, or whatever. But for me, like, the more people who are drinking wine, I'm okay with it. I don't like to put labels on it and say it's natural. We in our store, in our wine store, it's lower intervention wines, because there's different parts of that spectrum. And believe it or not, for me, it's not a marketing label. Even in our own wines that I make are lower intervention wines, but I don't lead with that first, right? Because it's more of a lifestyle to me. It's not a marketing term. So like that's, you know what I mean? I think people do it in different ways. Some people, it's a hard sell. Some people it's a soft sell. But for me, it's just more about, I want people, however they get to wine. I've also seen where, sour beer drinkers are now coming into wine. A friend of mine, Walt. What's up, Walt? From Wicked Weed, really loves, came in through natural wine, really has been drinking some amazing wines. And so it's been really interesting to see, some of the overlap and the idea of just getting people to wine.
Yeah, I completely agree with that front. And then what I'm actually seeing now is some of these bars that had only these crazy labels or crazy colors are now carrying a lot of the old world wines that are made in this, low intervention way. And then that's how people are being introduced to them, because they're like, oh, I didn't know this was low intervention. But speaking of that, your wines, let's get to that.
Yeah, totally.
Let's get to how your wines came about and how you started, because it wasn't a straight line to where you are today.
No, none of it was straight. I started, I think I started a lot with ideas. So for a lot of the names and the ideas and concepts that are alive today, all started around the Sommelier Stationette per se. These are all names, just shooting the shit, decanting priceless bottles of wine. I'm talking shit to the other sommeliers, like, yeah, I'm gonna make this wine called Show Nuff. It's gonna be spelled like Nuff, like Chateau Nuff, and it's gonna be my interpretation of American Chateau Nuff. And all the Bone Thugs, like the T-shirts, all of that happened right there, and those were just me keeping a running tally of just like having fun, passing the time, kind of halfway telling jokes. And Maison Noir, Mouton Noir was a nickname that was given to me. I was, there weren't a lot of people who looked like me in the industry, and I did do things my own way within the four walls of the restaurant, from the way that I described wine, from the way that I dressed. Like, all of those things were very different. I think I got reprimanded because I wore a Mickey Mouse watch. Right? You know what I mean? Like, and I only did that, because I had watched that movie Patch Adams. You remember? And everybody was afraid of the doctor. So everybody was afraid of the sommelier. And so no, I'm a real life person too. I'm fun too. And when she saw my watch a little bit, you could relax. I wasn't going to stick my hand in your wallet or your purse. You know what I mean? So it was that. And so I did things differently. And so I was like, when it came time, I was like, I'm going to call it Mouton Noir Wines. The labels are going to be fun, and we're just going to do something differently. And Willamette Valley was a place that was always near and dear to my heart. But actually, because I didn't have any money nor a business plan, the only way, that I started was because of, people gave me stuff for free. You know what I mean? Or no terms. It wasn't for free. No terms, extended terms, no terms at all.
Sure.
So that's where I started. And my original first project was out of Napa Valley. It was a wine called Thief and Law, which was a one-off, which was totally great. I started a company. One of the first brands I started was a brand for a company that I was a partner in called Relativity. And that was something that I left with them when I left to be completely on my own. And so, there was a lot of stop and start, but at what we know it as of today, it's all the Willamette Valley. I wrote a letter to everybody I had ever worked with. over the 5 years that I was at TK. And, I've always been a firm believer of putting it out in the universe, letting the universe co-conspire and really kind of help you make shit happen. And lo and behold, people started to write back, and that's kind of how it started. And then, it was something that I built from receivables. It wasn't, there was no business plan. There was no, I'm going to pay myself $100,000. There's none of that. It was just, I got a deal that I could make the wine, and by making it, I could hold on to the product, and they were patient enough, when I could sell it quickly, to be the bank. And, we built it from that to, to what it is today.
I know you see yourself as like an entrepreneur, and you've had that kind of spirit in you, it sounds like, since, even before you got into wine or into hospitality, maybe. So you had to have, when you went out there and started this project, you had to have an idea in mind, I'd imagine, of, is this going to be 1,500 cases, 15,000 cases, or like 1.5 million cases down the line? Like, what were you thinking in terms of like the scope and scale of the project? I know you want to get wine on people's tables, but what's sort of the goal?
But I think at the beginning, I had talked to this other sommelier who had done it before me, and he said, you need to sell 1,500 cases in order to make the same amount as a New York sommelier salary. And I think was where I was at. I think that's all that mattered. And then it became 1,500 a SKU. And then we started making, other stuff. But, I think in the long term, it was just more about, total world domination. Let's see how big we can grow it. Let's see how, and I went about that single-handedly by myself. So I think, I got on a plane almost every single week for a decade. Yeah. And that's how I built the brand, was just by showing up.
I was just going to follow with that is we're big fans of the Willamette Valley here. We actually did a little trip up there last year. We met with some of the guys from Chosen Family and toured around some of the other properties like Granville and a few others. How did you choose Willamette as your favorite? Is it the dynamism? Is it kind of acid, like an old world, depth to it? What was it that drew you there?
Well, all of the great wine lists that I had a hand in building, they bookend on red and white Burgundy, right? And so first love was Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, definitely Pinot Noir. And then when we moved to New York for Per Se, we started to speak to all of these old California wineries that we had relationships with, a lot of domestic wineries we had relationships with, to see if they would open up their cellars so we could bring older library wines in for the Per Se wine list. And that was when I really decided, it's like, I've always loved Oregon wine, but that was my thing that I championed. That was my thing. Like within the list, I think a lot of times what happens is you have this traditional list, and with that, you try to make your mark on it. And so the reason why we had 2 or 3 pages of Willamette Valley Pinot Noir was something that I championed. And so to me, it was the best place that rivaled Burgundy that was making Pinot Noir domestically. And just so happened the stars aligned. My mother-in-law's sister was head of public art works in Portland for 30 years. So we had some family there. I spent some time there. And then that was it, to me. And then when you looked at it, it was lower cost of entry. There was less competition. It was still growing. And so it seemed to be the right fit for me.
We talk sometimes on the podcast about like these new world regions. Sometimes they get caught in this trap of trying to be their European counterpart, right? And I think that Willamette, is about to emerge out of that phase of quote unquote trying to be Burgundy, or maybe people expecting them to be Burgundy, because I think maybe on the ground there, people, the growers and producers don't have that view. They think they're doing something unique, and I think they are. But I think public perception starting to separate themselves from that that image. Is that kind of... Yeah, I think so as well.
They have. The first wine I made in 2007 was a wine called Faux Original, right? The original fake. And, I tell the story that I would say most, if not all, domestic Pinot Noir producers, aspire to make Burgundy. Burgundy is this beacon of light in which they aspire to make, right? Mm-hmm. They're smart, but they're smart enough to know that like they can't make Burgundy. It's the care and the take and the Burgundian vignerons that they take and mindset that they're trying to make. And for Oregon, to me, was always this thing of like, they're seeking to make Burgundy, but along the way, they've discovered something that they've had before. So we talked about, there was a Dutch paint, the most expensive Rembrandt is actually not painted by Rembrandt. Right? So it's the whole idea of like, at some point, the student becomes just as valuable as the master. And I feel like, Oregon is that. I mean, when I first started this journey, I was in the Midwest. I walked into a store and someone said, "Yeah, this is a guy from the Willamette Valley." They said, "Where's the Willamette Valley at?" And I turned around and walked right out. Right? So,
Yeah.
Not realizing that that's an opportunity to walk back in and to say, "Hey, this is what the Willamette Valley is." But now it definitely is. Like the idea, like earlier, Billy, you were saying, like, we have a fondness for Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. It is definitely what it's known for, and I do believe that it around the world, in the industry, it's known that, and now it's starting to triculate and matriculate into, just on the ground floor with consumers, knowing that that Willamette Valley equals Pinot Noir. It's been an amazing thing to see. I think it's the Willamette Valley is somewhere around 55 years old, something like that, 56 years old. But it's been amazing to see that the work that they've done, and that that it's paid off.
Not to muddy the waters, but we've also recently been hearing from producers up there that Chardonnay is coming into its own also up there, and part of that is just because they were originally planted on the plots that wouldn't be great for Pinot, and then over the past 10 years or so, people have been exclusively trying to plant where they thought Chardonnay would grow best. We've had some amazing Chardonnay also coming out of there recently. Are you seeing that same kind of trend?
Absolutely. So Chardonnay was a clone of when they came to these are early settlers were of Germanic influence, so they planted what they knew: Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc. Right. So Chardonnay was an afterthought. Right. So, and when it was time to plant Chardonnay, we called our friends down in California, and they gave this a colonal selection of Chardonnay called the Winty clone. Winty clone is a late ripening clone, more temperamental to the California climate. Right. So it's late ripening. If we could ever get the damn things to ripen, the wines would be so flabby. Right. So they would lack acid. And obviously there were microclimates within the Willamette that it thrived and did well. But for the most part, Chardonnay sucked in Oregon, right? And then when we got hip to the game, we changed clonal selections and started using more Dijon clones, 76, 96, stuff like that. And that changed the scope of everything. I want to say 2007, so 2007, 2006, the Chardonnay that Evelyn then made changed everything. And I think you can say that you made it. Now we have our own Chardonnay symposium, right? So it's the Oregon Chardonnay Symposium, but it has changed. And there's been shining examples. I think Bethel Heights makes a 50-50, where it's 50 Winty clone, 50 Dijon clones, and that's been something that they've been doing for quite some time. That's pretty remarkable and amazing. Chardonnay we make has been Dijon clones planted back in 1986. And, we still make, maybe 4 or 5 barrels of that from Yamhill. But yeah, Chardonnay has definitely come into its own here in the Willamette Valley.
I didn't want to miss the opportunity to ask, what were some of the producers that you were bringing in per se when you first started from the Valley? Like, who were you championing at that time?
Oh, I mean, everybody from all of the classics. We also in half bottles. So when I say all of this, like all of the classics of Bethel Heights, I think we had Panther Creek when Ken Wright was making it. Ken Wright.
Is Penner-Ash too late? Is that?
Yeah, no. Penner-Ash that was still there. I mean, we poured their Viognier by the glass, right? So we bought all of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So no, we were entrenched in all of it. I think the newest stuff that was coming out that we were really excited about was Patty Green, Patricia Green wines. And this is the days where Bergstrom. So Bergstrom was is a totally different style now than it used to be. But we used to do half bottles of Bergstrom that we had. But yeah, we were entrenched in it, quite a bit. You know, so we're talking, you know, I left in like 07, right? You know what I mean? So that was a long time ago. So some of the ones that you're thinking about are some of the young guys weren't even around yet.
Sure. Yeah. One of the producers that we got to spend some time with over there, which kind of, for me, like really blended this like new world, old world kind of thinking, was at Lingua Franca with Toma. And if, I spent time with them or not, but coming from DRC. Go ahead.
No. Larry Stone's a good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And that winery didn't exist at all. Larry had bought the property a while back, but I had been buying wine from Larry. He had a project in Napa back in the day. So, but I remember when he came out there. We all came out there right around the same time.
Nice.
To Oregon, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, so building, I mean, obviously that's going really well, and also I love there's so many stories behind your labels. Again, behind the T-shirts as well. I really, for some reason I still haven't gotten one. I think it's because I can't pick one. But how has your wine background and your just interest in the arts? Because I know music played a big part in how you view wine, and I guess it's translated into some of your other things too. How has music played a part in your career as a whole and where it's going right now?
Yeah, I mean, music is the soundtracks to our lives, right? So I know that might sound corny, but like that's what it is. I can tell you, listening to Usher's Confession, counting inventory, right? Because you know what I mean, or putting away wine. That's what it was. You know, I think about it, you moved to New York. There iPods hadn't really came out yet, right? So it was just strange. Like, you know, I always had they would see me walking around with headphones on all throughout work, like not on the clock, but before service. And I think it was strange for a lot of people, which I just thought, like, how could that be strange? But maybe I was just living in the future, right? because you know, fast forward maybe a year or 2 years, you know, everybody on the subway is wearing white headphones. No, music was something that just, you know, was always a part of my life growing up. And it was natural that it carried into work, especially in a lot of the busy work, the grunt work. But also, you know, we were just advanced. Like, you know, a lot of times I'm just listening to, you know, flashcards on my headphones, right? So we just basically, you know, we had like, I don't know, 5,500 flashcards for studying, and then you just took them and you read them and recorded them, and then you just listened to them. You know, so it was a lot of that kind of stuff too, of like trying to multitask, you know, killing, you know, a couple of birds with one stone kind of thing.
Do you think the creativity...
And, you know, music's always been that. I think we did... Go ahead.
I'd say, do you think the creativity that kind of music inspired helps direct where you're going now with, like, getting into your creative agency, and then also just some of your other projects where you get to express yourself, whether it be Ed Sons Ham Bar or the Rye Sons or any of your other projects?
Yeah, no, I think, music's always been that. It's always been... You know, I think like puts me in that space of being creative, but you know, even, you know, like, so even at like a place like Per Se, you know, we did a meeting every single day, a pre-shift meeting. And you know, you had the menus printed out. So you had your menu, and then you had another printout. And on that printout, it talked about the guests that were coming in and all that. And then the whole back side of this other page belonged to the wine team. And from there, I created like magazine layouts of stuff to talk about and produces the highlight. So that creative part was always in there. Within like in the lineup, it's just like on that page, just a list, and then you flipped it over and it had like inlays. It had, you know, cutouts of like fucking wine keys and, you know, talking about, you know, awesome. Knights Valley and Peter Michael and apples and, you know, so I think, you know, I spend like 45 minutes a day on it. I think that really kind of helped my creative process. And like, so that was mine within the four walls of the restaurant. And I think, you know, later on, when it all became mine, music was always a part of that. To me, I think it helped set the tone, right? Especially, I think when you're talking about, you know, for me, I came from a place where, you know, food was that, but like my world was immersed in wine, and wine was everything. I wanted to be in a place where wine was just in the background. it helped set the tone. It was, you need like 20% wine, 80% whatever else the event is. And I think music always helped me do that on any level.
I think of your style as like Apple meets like sneaker drop kind of thing. So it's like super clean, like stripped back, but also like, like you said, this sort of idea of pop art, like like magazine. That's a great the way that you structured
it all comes from that. Yeah, just like, and I had never seen anybody do it. It's like I'm just taking the hip hop raised me, right? You know what I mean? Like it raised a lot of us, right? Like, but hip hop raised me. That's where I was coming from, and like this world of wine, right? So something that was new that I was passionate about, and then something that like raised me from my childhood. It was just putting my worlds together, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and so the ideas and the things that I get to do now are still rooted in ideas that I had in 2004 when I moved to New York. I think at some point timing wasn't right, or people weren't ready for what I had to say or do.
Yeah, I mean, and the music culture has such a big impact, or has had such a big impact on drinks culture over the last 25, 30 years. Like, I mean, I think like, a white guy went to a Catholic private school for college and came out of like a farming community, and the first brown liquor I drank was 1738. And like, I knew what Hennessy was, and like Dom, and like these are all things that come out before I had enough money to afford any of these things. I think that's probably an experience a lot of folks had, and certainly a connection between music and
popular
and
culture.
the drink
Yeah,
side.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's like black folks, we didn't drink tequila until Usher and T-Pain said, "Blame it on the Patron," right? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then all of a sudden it became backordered, right? Something that, So it's always been there, and I think more and more as you start to see it cross over fashion, food. I was telling someone, it's like, the restaurant's the runway now. Where do you get dressed up to go anywhere to do what?
Yeah.
Like everything's not formal anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, and eating out is kind of the last bastion of things that we do as a community. Right? You know what I mean? Like it used to be like shopping, but like people shop online. I mean, even food is being thrown into the array of like, you paying $35 for one cheeseburger.
Get it delivered.
It's delivered to you like, 2 blocks from your house or whatever. But, so it's always been, to me, it's always been the same, probably the same thing, food, fashion. And, I think I probably learned that a little bit later. It hit home a little later, like after I left, per se. I did some consulting work. I built a distribution company. Then I left, and then I took some odd jobs as I was trying to build Maison Noir. And then, and then I realized I still wanted to open a wine bar. And this is 2008. But I realized I've never run a restaurant before. So I took a job working for these young Australian kids who were kind of at the height of fashion in Australia. And so anytime something was happening, they were all at the restaurant in New York, and it was a different vibe and a different thing that I got to see that I don't think that I give enough credit to. I talk about working at Per Se and French Laundry, but like also seeing this other part, this creativity part and working with other creatives, like-minded creatives from different genres, really kind of helped me build my base and my style.
Was building community also behind the idea? And also, it's delicious. But for Sons, like nobody goes and eats a plate of ham or prosciutto by themselves. Like you need to go with somebody.
Correct, but I mean, you have to go with somebody. It's always been about community. One, I think community, like in my neighborhood, because I have a home here. There was no place. I constantly found myself going outside in my neighborhood to eat. And the whole idea is of eating plates of ham or something like that. It's like, it's no different than any other wine bar where you go get charcuterie, right? I think sometimes people like to read too much into it. It's just a wine bar that serves American charcuterie, right? We do have the largest selection of American country hams under one roof. And that's been great. We have wines all the way back to, I think we just bought some stuff from the 50s. So it's been a real kind of history thing and a fun thing for us. I feel like those wines represent some of the most absolute values in wine today. And the fact that like, you could drink these crazy wines for, I mean, I mean, we buy them, all the time. It was just, it's like you can, for $60, you can buy drink wines from the 80s. I think we have, Kenwood wines from the 80s, Jack London.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Cab for like $60 from like 1986. So it's a really fun idea. And I feel like even for like people in the industry who want to work, they get a chance to work and they get to learn the mechanics of decanting, opening old bottles of wine, learning the mechanics of how to do that at scale, right? Because everybody's ordering an old bottle of wine. And that's been really fun. It's 400 square feet. And, for me, it's no different. You go to Spain and you go to a jamon bar, right? So it's a ham bar. You go there.
Exactly.
You ready? There's no Italian wine there at all. And you definitely bet your sweet ass there's no American wine there. What I thought was just interesting was it was just that. It was just everything from that country. And we didn't have that here in America. And I was like, I want to create that. Not out of spite, just out of fun. Right? To say like, hey man, we've been curing hams for over 100 years. I have wines back to the 50s. Like, we get to be a part of that conversation. The first gift that I think that Thomas Jefferson bought to the King of France when we were a free nation was a Virginia ham. Like,
nice.
we embedded in this shit. You know what I'm saying? Like we should be able to talk ham. So it was just something fun that I wanted to do, and it's been remarkable just to kind of build it, and almost like have to start twice. Right, because we opened January 2020, or open for a few months, right. Esquire's Best New Bar, all that crap, and then it all comes to a screeching halt. And in New York, it doesn't stop, right? So it keeps moving forward. So, when it's time for us to reopen, everybody's like, where's it at? Like, what's it about? But having to start over has been great and fun for us. But, so it's always been about community in my neighborhood. That spawned, I would say, 6 other places, food businesses on that one street in my neighborhood. From, we have the Ann Sons Ham Bar. Next door we have Ann Sons Buttery, which is our provision store. Next block is my office, but we put a breakfast taco pickup window because I grew up in San Antonio. So we're using Benton's bacon. We're making our own tortillas right there on the spot. Nice. Heirloom eggs. Now eggs cost $1 a piece. Heirloom eggs, yeah, okay. Right, so, and then next block is nothing. It's the fire station. Block after that is our newest restaurant called Kingfisher, which is our seafood restaurant. Next block is Chickadee Bread, which is our bread bakery, and then 2 blocks down from that is Vineyard, which is our wine store. It went from like one, and then all in 2 years, the rest of the business came, and that to me that was all about community. Building those things that that I wanted in our neighborhood, that I think that we needed, and that we were all going outside of our neighborhood to spend money, but also meeting talented people and giving them a platform to to get the shine on.
Wow, I had no idea it had grown to be that many spots. That's amazing. I wish I still lived in New York. Sadly.
Oh yeah,
yeah, moved away 4.5 years ago now. But on your note about American history and that type of old stuff, like rye, I've seen your notes on rye whiskey, and number one, the spice and everything. Mm-hmm. I also agree with as in terms of comparing Cabernet Sauvignon to bourbon and rye to more of like a Pinot Noir. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe I don't know if it was your ham research or just the love of rye got you into making your own rye whiskey?
No, rye, I think was like, that was just full circle moment. Like, when I first started, became an adult and started drinking, it was scotch. It was the brown water that I drank before I drank any wine. I went to college in Oklahoma City, and, one of the guys I used to work with as a waiter was a bookie. I worked at Red Lobster. So imagine that we have this what was his name? He was so funny. Tall guy with longer blonde hair, but like kind of balding in the middle. And he had like a little, he had like a, it was named Jeff. He had like a little limp, Like, but he was a bookie. He actually wasn't the bookie. He knew a bookie, but he loved to gamble. And so he got us, when I say us, me and my roommate got us into gambling. And he would, so me and my friend just went crazy. We'd bet like 54 like college games, like something crazy like that. And what happens is, since he knows the bookie, he can only take one side. He can't play both sides. So if I liked, Ohio State, and he liked Pittsburgh or whatever, and it felt comfortable, he would take our money that was supposed to go on Ohio State and put it on Pittsburgh, and then he would get crushed. And so Mondays were like, he would just get crushed, dude, like literally. Like, and so like on Mondays was payday. And so we would always go out on Mondays, and we would go into a place, and the first thing he would say, he says, you guys have Wellers? And they're like, no, we don't have Wellers. Then he'd walk out. This is 1996, right? Right? So I had never even heard of Wellers. I was like, the fuck old shit is this that this guy's drinking, right? Right? And so, I was drinking more single malt, right? So I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, so he got me into drinking Weller. I didn't even know, right? So I was just drinking Weller. I went back to Texas in like 97 or 98, and like there wasn't much Weller. And so it just, to me, that all came full circle. So I used to work, when I worked at Per Se, I met this guy named Sean. Sean worked for me, worked at Per Se, and he was a back waiter. We became friends. He ended up leaving to go work for someone else, and then he eventually started to open his own restaurant. The first restaurant he opened was a place called Char Number 4. Char Number 4, little at the time that we know, it was probably the first whiskey forward restaurant in America, American whiskey. And that was it. And then Sean was like all into American whiskey. We started talking. He opened Maysville. We were close. We started to become close. Our families traveled and all kinds of stuff together. Long story short is that he sold all his restaurants to go all in on a company that he started with a couple of friends called Pinhook.
Oh, wow.
And so Pinhook started to kind of blow up. And it was interesting, as I was out anywhere in the world, mainly in the United States, like I would see the brand Pinhook behind the bar or in the store. And so it was always a thing to see it was growing and fun. And during the pandemic, he hit me up and was like, yo, man, we're thinking about doing a collaboration series. They've always had this winemaker's approach to whiskey, vintage dated, and, using the barrels as their harvest. He said, what are you up to? I said, pretty much nothing, man, just hanging out. He said, he told me about the project. He said, I got 10 barrels of 10-year-old Wyoming whiskey, and, we need to make 2 batches. And I said, well, come on down. So we hung out in the back office, and, we hung out in the backyard of my office for about 5 hours, blended up these 2 different batches, and it was great. It was a fun experience, and blah, blah, blah. We talked, and then we released it, and I was like, oh, shit, I was like, dude, everybody's mad at me. I'm getting all these emails from people I don't even know, And he says, oh, he goes, hold on. I said, is everything going okay? And he's like, yeah. He goes, why? I said, because all these people are writing me all these shitty emails. He's like, oh, no. Hold on. Let me explain something to you. In this business, he goes, you're doing it right if people are mad at you. And I was like, oh, okay. Okay. And then we just started talking, and it was like, that wasn't, my style is more like for the people. And the idea of creating, craft rye, if you would, it's something that, I think insiders, like bartenders and other people, that's what they're drinking. For me, it's America's First Spirit. So it checked off a lot of boxes, and we just came to the conclusion. He came to me, he's like, we should just do something permanent. And thus Rye Sons was born, and, we're off to the races, and it's been kind of fun. To kind of get back in there and talk, when I started Maison Noir Wines, it was about wine by the glass. Like that was the target. We wanted to make quality wine by the glass for restaurants. And here it's kind of the same thing where you're trying to bring craft back to the well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how sort of your projects are pulling in, like triangulating so many things from around the country, right? You've got your wine in Willamette. I mean, you're working with Benton's down there, like bringing Benton's to New York. I have, let's see, people on YouTube can see, but like I have the High Wire project.
Yeah.
At High Wire Distilling with Benton's. Smoking Jimmy Red corn, or putting Jimmy Red corn in the smoker at Benton's. All of these things are such a crisscross. And I love how you bring.
Those are my people. So Scott and his wife were my roommates for an event.
Really?
Yes, and, along with Julian Van Winkle. So just imagine that.
Oh, wow.
We were at the house in South Carolina, and I remember I came with my brother, my younger brother, and I had done the event before, so I kind of was familiar with like the cabin. And I was like, oh, we'll just take the room upstairs, and we're packing. We didn't think anybody was there, but I was like, wow, there's a lot of pappy in the house, right? I mean, it was like, it was whiskey too, but it was like all these offshoots of maple syrup and like crackers and with jams and shit. Yeah. And then I just remember my brother, I hear my brother talking to somebody. I'm like on the porch waiting for it, and I hear him talking to someone. I was like, oh shit, okay, hold on. So I run back in, and it was, just because like he doesn't know anybody there, and he doesn't know probably the right thing to say, and they're probably like, why are you in the house? You know what I mean? Kind of thing. Like, I just know. So I went back in and I was like, you know what I mean? They're like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Kind of thing. Or, hey, how's it going? And so I went back in and we started talking, and it was funny. And so, I think we spent that whole night on the front porch hanging and drinking with everybody and just talking. Nice. And so it's been really fun to see. The whole Jimmy Red was a project that I think Sean had resurrected. Sean Brock was resurrecting, and so
Glenn Roberts.
He does the cornbread mix.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So we were using the cornbread mix at our place. Yeah.
And so that's awesome. Anytime. No, go ahead. Yeah, anytime we see, or I go up to like New York or other parts of the country, and I see Anson Mills or like Geechee Boy or Geechee Mill or something like this kind of stuff, bringing up some of these heirloom grain varieties and corns and stuff from the South. I think that's really awesome. So I appreciate that you're.
Oh no, man, we're on it. We're on it. Duke's mayonnaise. Actually, we actually have Blue Plate mayonnaise. No, that was the whole idea. Was like to incorporate all of these really kind of fun things. We have, we buy a lot of the hogs. Tank, my boy Tank. We just bought a hog from him. He was bringing those up. So it's rooted in Southern roots, but like we all also have New York examples of it's so funny because it comes from upstate New York. Is it considered country ham? You know what I mean? Like, so all of those kind of debates and all those kind of things are really fun. But yeah, we put Benton's bacon on a breakfast taco. Yeah, it's pretty legit.
That's awesome.
It's pretty legit.
Do you guys use any special rye, like a Brutzi or something, to make your blend?
No, so as far as rye, what's interesting to us, I think when you look out on the market, most people, it's like 90% rye, 95% rye, and then something else. For us, it's 60% rye and then 20-20. And I think, and I think for us, that makes it pretty unique. I think it makes it like very soft and inviting. It has those attributes, but it's not like knock you over your head kind of crazy. And I think just changing up the blend has just been different for us.
Do you guys finish it in any unique way, or is it just kind of?
No, we don't. Yeah, no, we don't. It's so funny because I always try to explain to people. It's like to put it in simplest terms for us. It's like whiskey is an interesting thing. It's like I talk about wine, and I say blending is the most creative part of the process, right? In the winemaking, it's scientific, it's biology, it's chemistry, it's pretty finite. But where we all get to be creative is in the art of blending. And I was saying, in whiskey, it feels like most people don't distill. We don't distill, right? But like you buy your distillant from different places, and what makes you different and unique is how you blend, what you blend it with, and how you finish, right? So are you finishing it in certain types of barrels or not? And we haven't. We didn't. It's nothing anything special. But I feel like some of the special one-off projects and stuff like that will be finished in different stuff. Whether it be a meeting of the minds and it's finished in, one of our, OPP barrels or something like that. Or maybe something else. But right now we just wanted to get, a core, rye out that we feel that we can be, somewhat consistent with and get it in front of people and get some responses back and get it moving.
Yeah, I actually like that when new distillers put out kind of like a very, I want to say basic, but like core product like that, and it doesn't have a lot of kind of extra levers pulled, because then when you do those other sorts of special releases and things, you kind of can always revert to that baseline for like comparison. And I just think it's interesting. So yeah, no knocks on that process at all.
No, we love it. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a really fun thing to do, and still feeling that I really hadn't really got a chance to roll up my sleeves and dive in the sense of going on the road and talking to people, because that's really, to me, that's, I've only done it one way. It's where I got on the road and got in front of people and talking to people and sharing the stories, pouring the whiskey, that kind of thing. And so, I've done some of that, but, I'm looking forward to, doing a lot more of that.
Yeah, we were, we just have a couple of minutes here with you left, but I wanted to try and sneak in what Billy mentioned at the beginning, the green tea. We just came across PR Newswire, and so don't really have a lot of background about what you're doing. Can you shed some light on maybe some of that project? Are you a green tea fanatic now? What's going on?
No. So I just I was a spokesperson for this campaign. So just from people like me as a host. And so on that day, we had the gentleman from the Kettle, which is a green tea place, cafe in New York, and there's one in Japan. He was showing me and some of my friends some alternatives, how green tea can be a replacement for your coffee in the morning, and for non-alcoholic drinks and stuff like that. So I was just the host there, and it was a really fun thing. We filmed it in Calabasas. It was just a really fun thing. And even though those are also parts of being a sommelier. As a sommelier, I think a lot of times when people think about sommelier, they think just, wine, but it is pretty much anything liquid in the restaurant. So, the tea program, the coffee program, the bar program, non-alcoholic program, wine program, all of those things, the cooking wine for the chef, those are all things that fell under my purview as a sommelier. And so, Red Hat André, right, is representing a lot of those things. And so it was just a fun thing. I love working with them. If they want to have me back. But yeah, and I actually learned a lot, so it was funny, making your own matcha, that wasn't really around when, I was, on the floor, at Per Se, but I think they do carry their teas there, but, it was just really fun. So you'll see me doing a lot more stuff like that. It's just fun, curiosity stuff and revolving around drinks.
Nice. Well, one last note on your video or things you host. You and Brady have something in common, that you've both had Nebraska wine in at least the last few months. So that's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's funny. I thought you were going to say something. We both knew Gary V or something. I was like, you said Nebraska wines, Nebraska wines. Like, woo. That was a hard episode to shoot, I'd have to say. I tasted, a wine from all 50 states. I thought it would be fair to let the production crew pick the wines. That way I wouldn't be doing a lot of research. These are some of the most common brands that you can find from those places. And it was tough, it was like, people, I never want to shit on people's livelihoods. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a true thing, right? It's like, you try to talk about the wine, but you can never win for losing. But hopefully people, they continue to make them, they'll make them better, and we will go back and taste them. I don't even remember the wine from Nebraska, but I mean, a lot of them, man, were, it was tough. It was tough. Somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
Well, apparently somebody has done it, according to people in the comments. But how that goes.
Yeah. I guess my only note for your team picking wines is, I'm originally from Virginia, and Brady spent time there, and they picked a really random wine from Virginia. But aside from that, I thought it was really, really cool. So.
Which one was it?
They
choose?
They picked it was like a weird white blend. It was like Viognier. I think there might have been Muscat and some Chardonnay, but it wasn't. I think
it was Vidal. There was Vidal Blanc.
Yeah. So there's enough good vinifera, especially Cab Franc coming out of there these days, where I thought that could have been a choice. But
yeah, we pour. What do we use? We pour it by the glass. We pour something. Young Cat. I mean, makes some of the most amazing wines. I'll have to send it to you after that, but. He does the wines When We Were Wolves. It's Cabernet
Lightwell.
That was like,
Lightwell survey.
Yeah.
They're
So
awesome.
we do a lot of. Yeah, we pour them. We always have a slot for them by the glass at the hand bar.
Nice. They're awesome.
So that's what I said. I would have chose a time to pick all these stellar and obscure wines that like most people couldn't get and like everybody's mad at. They're like, oh my god! Like every time he has a wine, they all sold out. I was like, well, yeah, you don't have to buy. Like buying them at the winery is one thing, but now you have to just go out in your community and ask for them.
Yeah.
Right. That's part of helping them grow. It's like not having them. It's like if we just chose wines that were readily available, then like those people don't really need any help. You know
For sure. No, exactly. Yeah. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate your time today. You have your hand in so much stuff, so it's great to, at least for our listeners who we come from a lot of different places, like from the wine world or from the investing world, and to be able to pull all these things together along with hospitality and creativity and all that stuff is awesome. So we appreciate that.
That's cool. Any of your listeners want to invest in what I'm doing, man? Drop me in the DM. Hit these guys up. We got a lot of stuff. I don't know if it was supposed to work that way, but I said what they.
Yeah, I mean, that's we actually we're looking to potentially be able to work with more kind of producers and projects and stuff going forward and bringing that to our investors. So we'll chat offline and see what we can come up with.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot. Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
All right, that was our interview with André Hueston Mack. I hope everybody goes and tries to find some Maison Noir or some Rye Sons if possible, and then goes to the Vint platform and tries to buy some shares, either if Kurosawa is left or DRC, which, who knows, that could also go very quickly. But I will say it's really not a bad problem when you have to decide between Kurosawa and DRC. So hope you all enjoy this episode, and we'll talk again next week. Cheers.
To check out our current offerings and to sign up for the Vint platform, find us at www.vint.co. That's www.vint.co. For questions, comments, or feedback on the Vint podcast, please email us at support@vint.co. Vint and VV Markets are offering securities pursuant to Regulation A. Our offering circular as amended can be found on the SEC website. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments such as those on the Vint platform are speculative and involve substantial risks to consider before investing. We may provide communication that may contain certain forward-looking statements that are subject to various risks and uncertainties. Information provided in any communications, including this podcast, is not legal, business, or tax advice. All prospective investors should consult a legal, tax, or business advisor concerning the subject matter of any communications and any offering.